I can't believe they're charging me for a crown that's already falling out. I yelled this across the kitchen toward the plumber, who was currently half buried under the sink. He didn't look up. He just grunted and kept tightening a valve. The kitchen smelled like damp wood and old pipes. On the counter, a stack of receipts from this morning sat next to a dental insurance EOB that looked like it had been written in a different language. The crown was an out-of-pocket nightmare. Adult dental was a luxury add-on that my employer treated like a gold-plated membership. Yet I was still staring at a balance that made my jaw tighten. A white envelope sat on top of the pile, a notice from a credit bureau regarding a medical debt collection. I picked it up, expecting a confirmation of a dispute. Instead, it was a notice that a significant balance from a surgical clinic had been sent to collections. I didn't remember this. David had told me the insurance claim for his procedure had been approved, and the remaining medical financing was being paid off monthly. I felt a surge of sudden, irrational panic. I didn't look for a logical explanation or check the dates. I just grabbed my phone and called Sarah, twisted her chin and said, Sarah had lived in our subdivision for 5 years. She knew everyone's business because she worked from home and spent half her day on the neighborhood app. She was the kind of person who told you your lawn looked interesting when she actually meant it was overgrown. He's hiding something with the medical bills, I said as soon as she picked up. I found a collection notice for a clinic balance I thought was handled. Kim, honey, insurance companies are just vague about the numbers, Sarah said, her voice high and airy. David probably just missed a deadline. Or the insurer messed up the coding. Don't make a thing of it. You have the family dinner this weekend. Do you really want to be the one who starts a fight over a piece of mail? I looked at the envelope. I wanted the evening to stay normal. The thought of the dinner, my in-laws coming over, the expectation of a perfect household, felt more urgent than a billing error. You're probably right, I said, my voice trailing off. I'm just stressed about the dental bill. I probably misread it. I hung up, feeling a dull pressure in my chest. Once the plumber finally slid out from under the cabinets and left, the house fell silent. Dennis was at a friend's house for a play date, and the silence made me restless. I opened my laptop to check the school calendar for Dennis. He had a field trip coming up on Friday, and I needed to make sure the permission slip was signed. So, I spent 20 minutes obsessing over the packing list, completely ignoring the notice sitting on the counter. The thought of a disruption to Dennis's routine, or a disruption to the image we presented to the neighborhood, scared me more than the possibility of a lie. The gray Grand Rapids sky was turning a bruised purple. Lake-effect snow was starting to drift against the window panes, blurring the view of the neighbors' houses. I decided to call the insurance provider to clear things up. After 40 minutes on hold, the representative told me that the claim had been denied months ago, and that a subsequent appeal was currently stalled because the provider had failed to submit the required clinical notes. The bureaucratic loop was closed. Nothing was moving. I walked into the bedroom to put away some laundry. On the dresser, David had left a folder of papers he'd been organizing. I opened it and found a printed login sheet for the clinic's billing portal. I sat on the edge of the bed and typed the credentials into my phone. The screen loaded a dashboard of denied claims and a mounting balance that far exceeded the amount David had claimed was remaining. There were notes in the portal about a failed payment plan and a final warning before the account was flagged for collections. My phone buzzed. It was a text from David, running late. Don't wait up for dinner. I looked at the billing portal, then at the phone. I didn't text back, just stared at the balance until the room grew dark. The blue light of the screen started to make my head throb. I had tried to upload the appeal documents to the clinic's billing portal 3 times that afternoon, but each time the site timed out and cleared my session, leaving me with a generic error message and no confirmation. I needed to see it on paper. Walked to the home office and turned on the printer. It groaned, the ink cartridge blinking a low toner warning that I ignored. I printed 1 page, the summary of the denied claims and the final collection warning. As the paper slid out, the printer jammed, crinkling the bottom edge. I yanked it free, leaving a jagged tear across the date. I didn't want this sitting on the desk where David could see it, but I couldn't bring myself to file it away. Walked into the kitchen and shoved the paper into the back of the junk drawer, underneath a pile of takeout menus and old batteries. I stood there for a minute, my hands still on the drawer handle. The dental crown in my jaw gave a sharp, pulsing throb. I thought about the cost of the replacement and the way the insurance company had basically told me I was on my own. I called Sarah. I printed it, I said. The balance is way higher than he said. It's in collections, Sarah, Kim. Listen to me, Sarah said. Her voice was a soothing, practiced hum. Medical billing is a disaster for everyone. My husband had a whole thing with his physical therapy bills a few years ago. Total chaos, insurance denying everything. He didn't tell me for months because he was embarrassed. Men they freeze up with this stuff. But he told me it was handled, I said. Because he wanted it to be handled, Sarah replied. It's not a betrayal, it's just incompetence. Honestly, half the people on our street are probably hiding a medical bill or a credit card balance. Just let him bring it up when he's ready. Don't ruin the dinner. I let out a breath. The tension in my shoulders dropped an inch. If this was just how it goes, then I wasn't the only one. I didn't want to be the person who blew up a family weekend over something that might just be a clerical error or a lapse in David's organization. I hung up and started the roast. So, I spent the next hour obsessing over the timing of the potatoes, checked the school portal on my phone to make sure Dennis didn't have any new alerts for his field trip. A notification popped up about a missing permission slip for a library visit next month. I spent 10 minutes trying to find the digital signature button, completely forgetting about the crumpled paper in the junk drawer. The front door opened around 6. David walked in, smelling like cold air and exhaust. He didn't look at me. He went straight to the coat closet. Traffic was a nightmare on I-196, he said. The in-laws will be here in an hour, I said. He nodded and finally looked at me. He looked tired. He looked like a man who had just worked a long day, not a man who was lying about thousands of dollars in debt. I decided to let it go. I wanted the evening to stay normal. The dinner was a loud, crowded affair. My in-laws took up the entire living room, talking over each other about their retirement home in Traverse City. Dennis was running circles around the coffee table, ignoring everyone. While I was clearing the appetizer plates, I noticed the silver tea set sitting on the sideboard. It had been a gift from my grandmother, a heavy ornate piece that usually stayed in the china cabinet. David had moved it out to show his parents. I reached out to move the teapot to the tray and stopped. It felt light. Too light. I lifted the lid and looked at the hallmark on the bottom. The engraving was blurry, the edges of the letters rounded off, as if they'd been cast from a cheap mold rather than stamped into sterling silver. I ran my thumb over the handle. The texture was slightly grainy, not the smooth, cold polish of the original. Something wrong? David asked. He was standing right behind me. I held the teapot up. This feels different. Is this the original? David didn't blink. He reached over and took it from my hand. It's a replica. I sent the original to a specialist in downtown Grand Rapids to get the tarnish removed. He gave me this one to display so the sideboard didn't look empty. Since when? I asked. Since last week. I forgot to tell you. I wanted it to be a surprise for your mom's birthday next month, he said. He gave me a small, tired smile. It was a convenient explanation. It made sense. I looked at my mother-in-law, who was currently laughing at something Dennis had said, and I felt a sudden, sharp need to keep the peace. I didn't want to be the person questioning the silver while the house was full of people. Oh, I said. I didn't know. I'll get it back soon, he said, setting the teapot back down with a clink that sounded more like tin than silver. After the in-laws left, the house felt cavernous and empty. David went straight to the bedroom to change. I went back to the kitchen to start the dishes. I opened the junk drawer to find a rubber band for the leftover roast, and my hand brushed against the crumpled piece of paper. I pulled it out. The jagged tear was still there. I looked at the balance, then looked toward the bedroom door. My phone buzzed on the counter. It was a text from Sarah. Hope dinner went well. By the way, I mentioned to Brenda that you were stressed about those insurance headaches. She said she went through the same thing with her husband. You're not alone. I stared at the screen. I hadn't asked Sarah to tell Brenda. Didn't want anyone else in the subdivision knowing my business. I felt a sudden cold isolation in my own kitchen. I put the phone face down on the granite counter. The screen stayed dark, but the knowledge that Brenda now knew about my financial mess sat in the room like a bad smell. I didn't text Sarah back, I couldn't. My chest felt tight, the kind of pressure that makes it hard to take a full breath. I walked into the home office. The room was cold. The draft from the window frame was whistling, a reminder that the weather stripping needed replacing. I needed that library permission slip for Dennis. He'd been talking about the visit for 3 days, and I couldn't handle another missing form email from the school. I sat down at the computer and tried to log into the school portal one more time, but the page spun for a minute before timing out with a session expired message. I slammed the mouse down on the desk. I opened the filing cabinet. It was a beige metal beast that David used for important things. I started digging through the D folder for Dennis, but it was a disaster. Papers were shoved in haphazardly. I found a crumpled receipt for a car wash from 3 months ago, and a brochure for a lawn service we didn't use. Then I saw a manila folder labeled medical insurance. I pulled it out. Inside were the original notices from the surgical clinic. The ones David said were handled. They were stapled to a series of dispute letters that had been returned as undeliverable. He hadn't even sent them to the right address. He just let the debt rot. Tucked behind the medical papers was a heavy piece of cardstock. I pulled it out and read the header, Prenuptial Agreement. I stared at the page. I had never signed a prenup. We didn't have one. We had a wedding, a cake, and a honeymoon in Traverse City. But there was no legal contract. I looked at the date at the top, June 14, 2012. That was 2 months before our wedding. I flipped the page. At the bottom there was a signature line for me. The handwriting was a crude imitation of mine. The K was too looped. The Y didn't trail off the way it usually did. Next to it was a notary stamp. The ink was smudged, the seal slightly off-center, looking like it had been pressed onto the paper long after the ink of the signature had dried. A small yellow sticky note was attached to the back. In a sharp masculine hand it said, Notary handled, backdated as requested. Eric. Eric was David's business partner. They'd started their firm together years ago. I'd always liked Eric. He was the one who brought the expensive wine to the Christmas parties, and always asked about Dennis's soccer games. My hands started to shake. I leaned back in the office chair, the wheels creaking. This wasn't just a medical bill. This wasn't just a fake tea set. This was a map for an exit. If this document was real, in the eyes of the court, David could walk away from the house, the savings, everything, leaving me with the debt and a 7-year-old. I grabbed my phone. My first instinct was to call Sarah. I knew it was a mistake, but I wanted someone to tell me I was overreacting. I wanted to be the reasonable person again. I found something, I said when she picked up. A prenup, dated before the wedding. I never signed it. There was a pause. I could hear Sarah typing in the background. Is it a business thing? Maybe it's related to the firm? A lot of partners do those kinds of agreements to protect the company assets. It's probably just a formality. Don't let it ruin your night. It has my signature on it, Sarah, a fake one. Well, signatures can look different when you're stressed, Sarah replied. Her voice was too light, too dismissive. Brenda is coming over for coffee tomorrow. Why don't you just come over? We can talk it out. No need to make a scene at home. I looked at the forged signature. I looked at the smudged notary stamp. Sarah didn't care if I was being robbed. She just didn't want the subdivision to have a scene. She wanted the image of the neighborhood to stay intact, and I was just a plot point in her daily gossip. I can't come over tomorrow, I said. Are you sure? Brenda really wants to help you with the insurance thing. I hung up. I didn't feel the need to explain. The isolation I'd felt in the kitchen shifted into something sharper. I realized that every support system I'd leaned on in this neighborhood was contaminated. Wasn't a friend. She was a curator of local drama. I sat in the silence of the office, listening to the hum of the heater. I thought about the house. The mortgage was manageable. But if David used that forged paper to strip the assets, I wouldn't be able to afford the taxes, let alone the dental crown that was currently throbbing in my jaw. The fear of losing the roof over Dennis's head felt heavier than the betrayal. I scrolled through my contacts and hit the name, Mark. My brother picked up on the second ring. Hey Kim, everything okay? You usually don't call this late. I need you to look at something, I said. My voice sounded thin. I found a document in David's files, a prenup I never signed. It's backdated. What? Mark's voice dropped an octave. Are you serious? Send me a photo of it, right now. I took a picture of the signature and the notary stamp. I sent it over. That's a joke, Mark said after a few seconds. The date is wrong. The stamp is a mess. Who notarized it? There's a note from Eric. His business partner. It says the notary handled it. Eric? The guy who always wears the Italian loafers? Mark let out a short, harsh laugh. Kim, listen to me. Do not tell David you found this. Do not tell Sarah. Do not tell anyone in that neighborhood. You need to get that paper out of the house. I can't just take it, I said. He'll notice it's gone. Then hide it better than a junk drawer, Mark said. I looked at the manila folder. I thought about the medical debts, the fake silver, and the way David had looked at me during dinner. That tired, fake smile. He wasn't just incompetent. He was calculating. I stood up and walked back to the kitchen. I opened the junk drawer and pushed the torn insurance paper deeper into the back, sliding the forged prenup underneath it. Covered the whole mess with a stack of old takeout menus from the Chinese place on Division Avenue. My phone buzzed. It was a text from David, heading to the garage to organize some tools. Do you want tea? I stared at the text. I didn't answer. Just stood there, holding the cold handle of the drawer. The garage door groaned open. David walked into the kitchen, holding 2 mugs of tea. He stopped when he saw me. I hadn't moved. My hand was still white-knuckled on the drawer handle. You okay? He asked. I opened the drawer and pulled out the medical financing statements. I held them up, the denied explanation of benefits, EOB forms fluttering in the draft. David's face didn't change. He didn't gasp or look shocked. He just set the mugs on the counter. One of them splashed a bit of tea onto the granite. Where did you find those? He asked. In your folder, I said. The one with the clinic billing portals you thought I couldn't access. The one with the medical debt in my name. He leaned back against the counter. It's not what it looks like, Kim. It's a forged signature, David. You opened a medical financing account in my name to pay for your own treatments. Why? He looked at the ceiling. Things got complicated at the firm. Eric and we had some investments that didn't pan out. I needed a way to handle my health issues without dipping into the accounts you monitor. By putting thousands in medical debt on my credit report? I asked. I was going to fix it, he said. I just needed time. I thought about the silver tea set, the specialist in downtown Grand Rapids. Does he exist? David looked away. I pawned the set. I needed the cash for the clinic's immediate balance. The throb in my jaw intensified. The clinic for the surgery, you said, was covered by insurance. The insurance wouldn't pay because the doctor wouldn't lie, David said, his voice flat. I didn't get hurt at the gym. I got into a fight at a game. The insurer denied the claim because it was an excluded activity. I couldn't tell you I was gambling and fighting. I couldn't. I stared at him. The man in front of me looked like my husband, but he sounded like a stranger. I didn't scream. I didn't throw the tea. I just felt a heavy, dull exhaustion. My first instinct was to call my mother-in-law. I wanted her to know. I thought if she knew her son was a fraud, she would make him fix it. I dialed her number while David watched me. Hi, Martha, I said when she picked up. Can you come back over? David and I have something we need to discuss with you. I didn't tell her the details. I just wanted her presence to act as a leash on him. It was a mistake. I wanted to look reasonable, to handle this like a family matter, but I was just inviting more witnesses to the collapse. While I waited for them to drive back from their hotel, I went upstairs. I pulled a large suitcase from the top of the closet. I started throwing Dennis's clothes into it, his dinosaur pajamas, his soccer jerseys, the soft blankets he liked. My hand shook, making it hard to fold the shirts. David came up behind me. You're not leaving. I can't stay here knowing you've spent years using my identity to hide your debts, I said. We can work this out. I'll get the silver back. I'll pay the clinic. With what money, David? The money you gambled away? The front door opened downstairs. His parents were back. I walked to the landing and looked down. Martha and her husband were standing in the foyer, looking confused. David hurried down the stairs to meet them. I stayed at the top, listening to the muffled sounds of their voices. What is this about, David? Martha asked. I heard David start to explain. He didn't tell them everything at first. He tried to frame it as a misunderstanding about the silver. Then I heard Martha's voice rise. She had always prized the family's reputation. When the word forgery came out, the tone shifted. You did what? Martha asked. The argument grew louder. David was defensive, his voice cracking. He tried to explain the gambling, the debts, and the help Eric had provided. I stood there, clutching the railing, listening to my marriage be dismantled in the hallway. My phone buzzed. A text from Sarah. Brenda saw David at the pawn shop last week. She didn't tell me until now. I'm so sorry, Kim. We're all here for you. I stared at the screen. The neighborhood already knew. Sarah hadn't just leaked my insurance stress. She had been holding on to the fact that David was pawning family heirlooms. The support I had sought was just a circle of people watching the car crash. In slow motion. I went back into the bedroom and finished packing. I found the library permission slip under a pile of mail on the nightstand. I signed it with a quick, jagged motion. I heard the front door slam. David's father had left, probably disgusted. Martha was still there, her voice a low, rhythmic scold as she told David he was a disgrace. I walked downstairs. The house felt cold, despite the heater humming in the walls. David was sitting at the kitchen table, his head in his hands. Martha was standing over him, listing the logistics of how he was going to pay back the money he'd stolen from the family's perceived stability. I'm taking Dennis to my brother's for the weekend, I said. David didn't look up. Please. I can't, I said. I went to the junk drawer one last time. I grabbed the forged financing application and the denied EOBs. I didn't hide them this time. I put them in my purse. Knew the credit bureau dispute I'd started online was already stalled because the lender required a formal police report and a fraud affidavit before they would even review the signature mismatch. It would be a long process. I walked into Dennis's room. He was sitting on the floor, lining up his toy cars in a perfect row. He looked up at me and smiled. Are we going to the library? He asked. Yes, baby, I said. We're going to the library. I helped him put on his shoes. I made sure he had his backpack and his favorite water bottle. Outside, the Grand Rapids sky was a flat, oppressive gray, promising more lake-effect snow by morning. I led Dennis to the car. As I backed out of the driveway, I saw Sarah standing on her porch, watching me. She didn't wave. She just stood there, her phone in her hand, probably already texting Brenda that I was finally leaving. I drove toward I-196. The permission slip sitting on the passenger seat. I didn't know where I was going to live in a month, or how I would resolve the medical debt. But I made sure Dennis's seatbelt was clicked tight. She just lifted her chin and said, I'm staying at Mark's for the next few days while I figure out the logistics of a temporary order for the house and child support. My only goal for this week is to keep Dennis's routine normal and get these documents into the hands of a lawyer in Grand Rapids who can prove that Notary stamp was a fraud. I've already moved my paycheck to a separate account, but I know David Holmes still has the login for our joint savings. I have to be careful about what I access from the home computer before I can legally change the locks and secure my personal files. If you were in my position with a forged prenup and identity theft, would you prioritize freezing your credit report first to stop new debts from appearing? Or would you focus on securing your primary payroll account to prevent a freeze on your funds? My phone just buzzed. It's a notification from the insurance portal asking for a secondary verification on the denied claim.